Haman in the stone quarry.
It's a miracle. Look, we found him. We found Haman. I've heard many people, mention this as a miracle, and they present it to non-Muslims, but there are details missing. So we need to be very vigilant what we say. Assalamu alaikum, inshallah you're all doing well. Now you've probably already heard of this discovery, the name Haman in the Egyptian hieroglyphics. And I'm sure there are probably many of you that think that this is what's mentioned in the Quran. What I want to do in this lesson is examine this person, Haman, and whether in fact it is a person or whether it's a title. Now I do realize that based on this discovery in Egypt, that many would go with the opinion that it was a person, because the hieroglyphics mention a person by this name. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be pretending that I'm a skeptic. And so I'll be presenting arguments against this. At the same time, I'll also mention evidence why this opinion does hold some weight. So I'll be looking at it from both sides. And we need to be fair and not be biased towards one side or the other. If we look at the ayat where Haman is mentioned, we see, for example, it says, Inna firoun wa Haman wa junuduhuma kanu khati'in. Verily, Pharaoh and Haman and their soldiers were wrongdoers. So Haman had soldiers. To me, that would suggest somebody high up in the hierarchy. Another ayah which mentions Pharaoh and Haman in the same context, it says, وَنُرِيَ, and we will show. So this is Allah saying, we will show Pharaoh وَهَمَانَ وَجُنُودَهُمَا مِنْهُمْ. This is very important, this part, minhum, مَا كَانُوا يَحْذَرُونَ. What they used to fear. We will show them this. What did they used to fear? The loss of power. That's like with any oppressor. The thing that he fears is people rising up and turning against them and losing power. That's what they fear. And this fear occurs when oppression occurs. When you oppress, you naturally get fearful. Now, as I said, the section I want to examine is this part here, minhum, from amongst them. Now we know that Pharaoh and his junud and those with him, and we'll also realize that Haman was part of the Mala', him and his junud, they drowned. So why would it say minhum, from amongst them? My suggestion is it was talking about a section of the dynasty. So dynasty is made up of many pharaohs. A section of them and their minister, Haman, saw what they used to fear. It wasn't all of them in the dynasty. And this happened after as I said, the death of Ramses II, and there was a decline that started. First of all, there was great oppression, and then the decline happened. So that could indicate that Haman is a title. My personal opinion is that it's a title, and I'll mention another proof of this, but I'm not denying this discovery. This discovery is interesting. What we should also know is if we're talking about Haman as a name.
Haman in the stone quarry.
Well, you would expect that because this name Haman or Haman is actually found in the hieroglyphics, and actually it's a god. He was a minor god, but nevertheless, Egyptians used to use the name of a god and then attach something to it, like an adjective or a statement about that god, and then call people by that name. As an example, we have this section in the hieroglyphics. The name Haman is there, and after it is attached a suffix. So this was a way of naming people in Egypt. But what we see with this name Haman is we find a person is a chief overseer of the workers in the stone quarry of Amun. So a stone quarry is where big blocks of stone used to be cut, and they were used to build the constructions. And this Haman was the chief. He was the inspector. He was the one that was overseeing all this. That's quite interesting because that's related to building And we know that Pharaoh told Haman, Ibni li sarhan, build for me a sarh. Now, I've deliberately left out this word, the translation of it, sarh, because I don't believe it's a tower or a building. I believe it's much more profound. And I'll explain this later on, inshallah. And I even asked ChatGPT about the possibility of a person being called Haman, having his name Haman, and being the chief of the stone quarry in a major city. The response was, and I said, don't do it in terms of a number, but in terms of a word or word to describe the probability. It gave two answers, vanishingly rare and effectively 0. So the probability is quite low, and that will hold some weight with people. People might see this and say, yeah, this is the Haman. What I would say about that is that although he's the chief of the stone quarry and he's the overseer of that area, he's not a minister. It's like the difference between somebody responsible for a major development in a city. He's the one that oversees all the major developments in the city, but he's not part of the government. Now, one could even go even further and say, yeah, that was before, but then later on he became part of the government. That's a possibility. So I'm not going to deny that. But we do know that Haman was part of the mala', part of the government. The Quran says, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ يَا أَيُّهَا الْمَلَأْ, O eminent ones, مَا عَلِمْتُ لَكُمْ مِنْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرِي, I have not known a God for you besides me. Why would he need to say that? There was some doubts creeping in. So the tide was changing. This shows that he was losing power. Interesting then, what he continues on with the conversation. He says, فَأَوْقِدْ لِي يَا هَامَانَ عَلَى الطِّينِ. He mentions the name Ya Haman during the conversation, which would indicate that Haman was there. He was part of the mala'. Okay, so what we find in the hieroglyphics is not the same level as what is mentioned in the Quran. The Quran also says, أَوْقِدْ لِي. It means to create a fire. But we see him in the stone quarries. And we'll later know that in the stone quarries, what happened was they were cutting stone using very sophisticated methods, but they were cutting it. There wasn't any heat involved. So if we say that this Haman is the Haman of the Quran, there's details that are missing. What I suggest is we should just remain silent on it. We should present what's mentioned, that he's, we found this person, his name's Haman, he's the chief of the stone quarries and so on. And he could be the Haman of the Quran. But to go around and to say, it's a miracle, look, we found him, we found Haman. Like I've heard many people, mention this as a miracle, and they present it to non-Muslims, but there are details missing. So we need to be very vigilant what we say. I want to go down a different route. It's going to involve some Arabic. It's going to be examining the two words that we've covered so far, Firoun and Haman. I'm going to be diving into the etymology of these two words, how they derived. Because after all, the Quran it's bilisanin Arabiyyin mubin. Everything in the Quran is Arabic, actually. Those who say that there's some words that are not Arabic, no, every word is Arabic. Even words that have been taken from other languages, they've been made Arabic. And so the base letters have some meaning. Let's look at this, inshallah. This is quite interesting. We have the word Fir'aun. Here the waw and the noon are extra letters. So what are the base letters of this? Fara'a. Fara'a means it's when, for example, when you have something that's branching out, there's many branches. One of these branches is called a fara'. It branches out. And then you have another fara'. Okay? It would indicate one of these branches, one pharaoh. So you have multiple branches, different pharaohs. What's interesting with this word is the meanings that are associated with it. We can actually get further meanings by rearranging the letters, the base letters. So fara'a, we could get rafa'a, he elevated. We also have arafa, to know. So these two meanings. And that's actually what Fir'aun is. He's the one that's elevated and that people know. And so that's the meanings that you get from firoun, from those base letters. Now, Haman could be derived from haymana yuhayminu, and you get the word muhaymin. The Quran is called muhaymin. Muhaymin is someone or something that is a protector, an overseer, a controller, a guardian. And so one could then, what could come to mind is, oh, he was the chief and the overseer of the stone quarries. But actually, I'd go even deeper than that. He was the protector and overseer of the whole of Egypt.
Work harder for the glory of Egypt.
He was the political influencer. He was the one that allowed Pharaoh to have the power that he has by influencing public opinion, by propaganda, affecting the religious institutes there, the education institutes, preserving the idea of Pharaoh as the ultimate supreme god and leader of Egypt. That was his job. That's the opinion of some scholars. And so they say that he had a very high rank. Now, when does Pharaoh tell Haman to build him a Sarh? If you read Surah Ghafir, it's quite interesting. It talks about Musa Islam being sent. So he was sent with our signs and a clear authority. And the surah mentions a lot of things that happen. Part of it, it shows that his loss of power, that even within the family of Pharaoh, there were believers, people starting to believe in Musa Islam. And that was the reason why he tells Haman, he says, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ يَا هَامَانَ ابْنِ لِي صَرْحًا. O Haman, construct for me a sarh. It's not a tower, it's not a building, because the biggest constructions were ones that were constructed much earlier. We have, for example, the Pyramid of Giza, which was up to 150 meters tall. There's no other construction that's taller than that. So if we're talking about a tower, because that's how it's usually translated, Sarh is a tower. But how big is the tower? And what's a tower going to do? Our eyesight can go much further than a tower. I just want you to understand that Pharaoh is not just going to waste resources and build something that is pretty much useless for him. He wants to build it so he can see the God of Musa Islam. What is he building? What is it? I'll explain that in the next lesson, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Its shadow shall fall across the desert for 1,000 years.